So not far from Lochcatron, we go head to Doune Castle. And some of you might be aware of Doune Castle as Castle Leoch from the popular TV series Outlander. Well, hello everyone. I'm Jenni Steele and I look after film and creative industries for Visit Scotland. It's great to be part of your programme and I hope you've enjoyed the sessions so far. Scotland has long been an inspiration for many writers, filmmakers, producers over the decades, and I thought I would show you just a snapshot of some of the places that have been of inspiration around Scotland to those writers and filmmakers over the years. Next year in Scotland we celebrate the Year of Scotland's Stories, which will be all about our myths and legends and regional tales, film and culture and literature. So there's going to be lots to discover next year, and hopefully by then we can welcome you all back, which we're looking forward to doing very much. Over the next few minutes, I thought I would just take you on a little bit of a journey around Scotland. So there may be some stories that you're aware of, there might be some new things in there for you, but hopefully you'll enjoy what I'm going to show you, and it'll give you some inspiration and food for thought for your own road trips. So I thought a good place to start would be in the Trossachs area of Scotland, because this is really synonymous with the writings of Sir Walter Scott, one of our most famous writers, who started off as a poet and then became a writer. And some of his works, Ivanhoe, the Waverley novels, Rob Roy MacGregor, and in this case, The Lady of the Lake, really became popular in this Victorian era because they'd really depicted a fantastic sort of romantic element of Scotland, and we can really thank Walter Scott for creating almost the first versions of literary tourism. So you can see in this slide here on the top left, here is a picture from a book around that time of when Scott's Lady of the Lake was published. You can see this is a steamship on Lochcatron, which will take visitors around the loch so they can admire the beauty of the landscape and the nature. Of course, these were things which Walter Scott loved writing about and felt very passionate about. And the picture on the right here is Lochcatron today. And you can see it's not really very much different. You've still got the steamship, which does trips around the lake. And here in the centre, you can see Ellen's Isle. And this is named after Ellen, the heroine in Lady of the Lake. And there's a lovely portrait here of Scott, and you can really sense that romantic element of Scotland with the mist and the dogs and the trees and the sort of natural colours, and how he's depicted in this portrait. And there's lots of information that you can find out about Walter Scott, because this year, from the summer and into summer 2022, it will actually be a celebration of the 250th birthday of Walter Scott. So down at his home in Abbotsford in the Borders, the team there, along with lots of different partners who have connections to attractions or properties or associations with Scott, are going to be putting on a programme of events. So some of those will be online, some will be in person. So there's some great opportunities to find lots about this really famous writer and what he's given to the world. So not far from Lochcatron, we go head to Doune Castle. And some of you might be aware of Doune Castle as Castle Leoch from the popular TV series Outlander. And you can see it here in the top left picture with two of the characters, Claire and Gillis, in the gardens of Castle Leoch. And this is the real castle to the right of it. So, and you can see that filmmakers don't have to do very much CGI to this castle, because it is so perfect in terms of a location and a backdrop, and it really has that sort of very sort of stronghold look about it. And so the Outlander really sort of had a base here. This was the Castle Leoch. It was Jamie's family's home, and lots of the scenes took place in the castle and around the grounds. So if you're looking back, especially in series 1 of Outlander, if you're a fan, you'll see lots of this castle, both inside and outside, featured. And it's not just Outlander that used this castle as a backdrop. It's been a favourite for filmmakers for some time. Quite a few years ago, Monty Python and the Holy Grail filmed some of the scenes here, and you can see the knights clambering down the banking on the picture on the left here. Outlaw King movie starring Chris Pine, which was about the life of Robert the Bruce, also filmed there a couple of years ago. And something that people might not know is actually the castle was used in the pilot episode of Game of Thrones, where Doune Castle featured as Winterfell. So now we move a little bit further south to one of our main cities in Scotland, to Glasgow. And I wanted to show you this picture because it features a beautiful mural of the work of a book called Lanark by a writer called Alistair Gray. And Lanark was written over a period of 30 years, and it contains realist and surrealist depictions of Gray's growing up in Glasgow. And it really has become a cult classic. It's won several awards over the years, and he was actually described as perhaps the best Scottish novelist since Walter Scott. So it's a really interesting read, and places like Glasgow Cathedral, which is pictured here, are also featured in it. So Oranmore, which is the venue that this beautiful mural is in, Oranmore is actually a Gaelic word. It means the great melody of life, or big song. So this is perfect because actually this former church is actually now a really great arts and crafts and sort of an entertainment venue. So they have a great events where you can go and see live music, you can go and have some good food. They also run a brilliant event called A Play, a Pie and a Pint during the day, where you can just go and hear some really new Scottish writing, just get involved in lots of different cultural events. So it's a brilliant place to stop in if you find yourself in Glasgow. So still staying in Glasgow, but having a slightly different take on the city this time. A couple of years ago, this was used in a movie by Brad Pitt, which was called World War Z. It was a sort of apocalyptic zombie film where the city was taken over by sort of crowds of zombies. And Glasgow actually doubled as the centre of Philadelphia. So you can see on the picture on the left here, this was meant to be the Philadelphia City Hall, with a map information for people in the centre. And actually on the right you can see it's actually the Glasgow City Chambers, which is our council chambers, right in the centre of George Square, which is one of the main squares in the city centre. And it was great because the whole sort of square became really sort of unrecognisable in terms of what it is normally like. They had the street lights, they had the yellow cabs, they had some trucks and cars in a sort of crash scenes on their sides. Everything, all the props were there, and the people of Glasgow really took to this production because some of them got the opportunity to be extras in the movie, but also between takes, the crew would allow people to obviously cross the square and get go about their daily business. But it really felt like there was a great buzz in the city because it's not every day that you get to walk around the scene of a zombie apocalyptic movie. So it was brilliant that the city would just accommodate the film crew like this, and it just shows the versatility of Scotland as a film location. And so now we head a little bit further south, down to Ayrshire and Galloway. And this is perhaps very well known for being the birthplace and the homelands of Robert Burns, our national poet. Now he was really a man of the land. He was as a ploughman, a farmer, and he wrote a lot about his daily life, what he would observe when he was out in the fields and nature, and about the people he met. And some of the experiences he had. So this lovely portrait here is from the National Galleries, and you can see Burns was a very sort of charming young man. He had lots of women admirers, and he had quite an interesting life. And the picture on the right here is actually his birthplace, this little cottage, this thatched cottage in Alloway, and you can go and visit this cottage, and you can see it's quite a humble sort of modest building, but it really shows, where life for him began, and that he never really forgot his roots, and he was always really known as a man of the people. And one of his works here, the To a Mouse, there was actually a collection of stamps which was there to commemorate Burns, and here's one just of the little lines from the poem. So it's possible to take part in some Burns events all around the world, because his work is translated into hundreds of languages. So many people around the world maybe associate him with Burns suppers and Burns night at the end of January, when there's a great celebration of his life with music and food and song. So perhaps you might have the opportunity to find a Burns club near you, and you can go and take part in those if you can't do that in Scotland just yet. And here's some slightly different culture now. So still in the same area, around in the southwest of Scotland. And this is The Wicker Man, which was filmed in the 1970s in and around this part of Scotland. And the castle you see here is Culzean Castle. So this is owned by the National Trust for Scotland, which you can go and visit. And in the movie, this was Lord Summerisle's mansion. And as you can see, it's got beautiful grounds. It sits right on the cliff top, has amazing views right over the coastline. And actually, Eisenhower also visited this property, and there is an apartment which you can rent named after him. And then you can see on the right here, this is the Wicker Man, which is at the end of the movie, the burning of the Wicker Man. So it's quite a poignant image, and it has become such a classic sort of cult movie with a great following over the years. And maybe not so many people know that it was actually filmed here in Scotland. So now we move up to our capital city, to Edinburgh, and the surrounding area of the Lothians. And there are so many books and films and TV shows that have been set here that we could almost do an entire session just on that part alone. But I picked out a few for you today, some which you might know, some which you may not. And I wanted to start here with a bit of sort of murder and mystery and intrigue, and we're featuring, of course, Ian Rankin, who's one of our best loved crime writers, and he's of course famous for his rebus novels. So Noughts and Crosses was his first rebus novel. He'd written other ones before that, but this was the first in this series. This is a picture of Ian outside the Oxford Bar, which is in the centre of Edinburgh, and this is his favourite pub in Edinburgh. And he might be spotted sometimes. Ian lives in the city. You can sometimes spot him there. It's also said that if you have a book you would like signed, you can perhaps take it into the bar, leave it behind the bar with the barman, and then the next time Ian's in, he can perhaps sign it for you. So there's a good chance that you can have your book signed if you're an Ian Rankin fan when you're in the city. Just outside of Edinburgh, there is Rosslyn Chapel, this beautiful chapel here you see on the right. It has amazingly intricate carved pillars, and there's carvings in the inside of the church. It is still a working church, and people have been going there for centuries to worship. And a few years ago, it hit the headlines because Dan Brown included it, obviously, in the story of the Da Vinci Code, and the theory that the Holy Grail lay under the floor of Rosslyn Chapel. And then when the book came out, the visitor numbers rose dramatically to Rosslyn because people wanted to come and see this location for themselves and get that feeling of to think, well, could there be a connection to the Holy Grail here? But then after the movie came out with starring Tom Hanks and Audrey Tautou, the numbers rocketed. And actually, it's an interesting dilemma because it is quite a small church, and thinking, well, how are they going to manage all these visitors who want to come? But they did a brilliant job of managing all the different visitor engagement and different things for visitors to do to make sure that the experience was really a good one for everyone. And what's happened over the years is that this chapel was undergoing a whole lot of restoration and conservation work on the roof, because it is a very important historical building in Scotland. And thanks to the money that's been generated from visitors, all that roof repair has now been completed. So it's great to see that this chapel is being restored, for future generations. So definitely worth a visit if you're over in Scotland. So now we go to the Cowgate of Edinburgh and different parts of the city where we had seen Trainspotting novels set, and obviously the film and two follow-up film were both set here. So Irvine Welsh, a really popular modern day writer, he's set a number of books in and around Edinburgh. Obviously, having grown up here, and he knows the city very well, and the different sides to the city. And I think 20 years ago or so, when the first film came out, Trainspotting probably wasn't the kind of film that a tourist board would be really excited about, because it wasn't something that the content of that movie was that you'd want to promote to people that happened in a destination. But the film came out, it was a great success, and people were intrigued by it, and actually for a time there were some Trainspotting tours around Edinburgh. But then fast forward 20 or so years, and then T2 was released, and it was a really interesting opportunity for us, because people's interest in those types of movies had changed, and there's a whole trend around cultural noir and really thinking about the sort of darker tourism and sort of that behind the scenes element of not just the castles and the palaces and the shopping and the nightlife. People wanted to sort of explore a bit deeper into a city, and films like this gives them that great opportunity to do that. So it was a good chance for us to work with the film distributors and see how we could work in a clever way using social media and different influencers and bloggers to target a different audience and just really highlight Edinburgh through a different way. And actually the scenes of Edinburgh in T2 look amazing, some of the shots that they have of the city. So it's been a really good opportunity for us to try something different and promote Edinburgh in a new way to different people. And the final one I've got for you today for Edinburgh is The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which is one of Muriel Spark's best loved novels. This was written and set in Edinburgh. It was about Jean Brodie, a teacher, and her experiences at the Marsha Blaine School for Girls. It's actually based on a school in Edinburgh, and in the movie with Maggie Smith, you can see her going around many of the streets of the city with the girls as she takes them out to educate them on culture around the city. And you can see how Edinburgh is just the perfect backdrop to this, because there's so much culture and history and heritage at every turn that it would be hard not to be inspired by that. Muriel Spark lived in Edinburgh for some time, and she also went to New York and actually was a writer for the New Yorker magazine for some time, before then moving to Tuscany, where she lived the rest of her life. And this book cover here on the right, this was actually created by Scottish publishers to celebrate the centenary of Muriel Spark, which was a couple of years ago. And you can see the typewriter keys here up to 22. That was all the books in the series. So Miss Jean Brodie is at number 6. It's definitely worth reading if you haven't. There's some great lines in there, and you can really get a feel of Edinburgh in that time period. So now we move a little bit further north. So this is to Perthshire, where you start to see the landscape change into maybe more of sort of Highland type scenery. And this is perfect setting to talk about some of our historical heroes. And of course we have lots of them in Scotland, and we can't sort of talk about all of them in detail today. But a few I thought I would mention featured in the films are William Wallace, featured here as by Mel Gibson in the movie Braveheart. This was filmed in Scotland. It was also partly filmed in Ireland, but people all over the world still recognise Scotland as being connected to Braveheart, and it's always on TV channels and around the world that people are always getting that opportunity to watch it and really to think about Scottish history and heritage and what happened about the real William Wallace. And not far from this area there's a monument, the National Wallace Monument, which you can go and visit, and it tells all the history about William Wallace and has some artefacts which belong to him, and there's some fantastic connections to the film as well. Another hero that you may well be aware of is Rob Roy McGregor, firstly made famous by Walter Scott novel, but also in the movie starring Liam Neeson. And this filmed around Perthshire, in fact in Drummond Castle Gardens, which you can see in the centre picture here. And this was a famous fight scene with Tim Roth as they were sort of having a duel. And not far from these gardens, you can actually see the gravestone of Rob Roy McGregor, and that's a lovely clan line there. McGregor despite them is their motto, and that's at the side of his grave. It's a very unassuming grave in a beautiful small churchyard on the side of a loch. And it's just very nice to make realise that actually it wasn't just a character from a book or a film, that he was a real person, and these were the lands that he roamed. So it's a really interesting place to visit if you have the chance. And lastly on this slide, I wanted to talk to you about Bonnie Prince Charlie. So of course many of you will know about him and his escapes over to the Isle of Skye, the Skye boat song, which obviously has been made famous again by the Outlander movie, Outlander TV series, with the Over the Sea to Skye. That was obviously written about Bonnie Prince Charlie escaping to the Isle of Skye. And also through the Battle of Culloden and various other the Jacobite uprisings. So you can find out so much about him in Edinburgh and Scotland, around in the museum, and you can go to lots of different places around Scotland, which you will see that the Jacobites and Bonnie Prince Charlie have had a huge influence on the sort of heritage of an area. And this picture here shows the actor who played Bonnie Prince Charlie at Drummond Gardens in Series 2 of Outlander. And actually these gardens doubled as the gardens of the Palace of Versailles in France. Much of the series was set in France, but actually they filmed all of those places in Scotland. And still in Perthshire, we have a lovely literary connection here, which is Beatrix Potter. Most people might think about her being connected to the Lake District in England, which she spent much of her life there. But you might not know that as a young adult, she and her family came to have holidays in a place called Dunkeld in Perthshire. And this is actually where she really got her love of nature and wildlife. And this is a picture of the Hermitage, which is just by Dunkeld. It's a beautiful walk which you can do around some waterfalls and forests. And you can see how she could really have got inspiration for those, for her writing there. So this is a picture here of Beatrix and her Benjamin Bunny out for a walk. And while she was in Dunkeld, she wrote a letter to a friend's little boy who was ill, and she wasn't really sure what to write to him. So she just started drawing some sort of characters and some rabbits, and she wrote a little picture story. And this is actually what became the basis of the well-loved Peter Rabbit character that is known in so many countries throughout the world today. She actually started off by drawing lots of flora and fauna and being interested in botany and fungi, and she was taught that by a gardener on the estate where they had the house, and he really helped her to develop her work, and actually helped her to gain the confidence to have work published, because in those days it was very unlikely for women to have papers published, and she went on to do that. So there's a great exhibition here in Dunkeld and Burnham, which you can go and visit, which has lots of lovely artefacts about Beatrix Potter, beautiful photos, and a garden which has little statues of all the lovely characters which she created in the stories. So we go a little bit further to the northeast now, and this is where you would find a lot of our whisky trail and our castle trails. And one of the castles I wanted to talk to you about here is Dunnottar, and this has been featured in many adverts and movies and TV shows, and you can see why, because it's got a stunning location perched right on the edge of the cliff, beautiful views, and it looks very majestic sitting here on the landscape. So it's been used in quite a different ways, especially in this slide here. The top one is the depiction of Dunnottar, which Disney Pixar used in their movie Brave. So they came to Scotland and they did so much research and talked about all the different places that they wanted to include in the movie, and then they took inspiration from real places around Scotland and created the magical Disney castle. And this was said to be based on Dunnottar. And you can also see it here in the Mel Gibson and Hamlet. And you can see it's a very sunny day, and I think actually the crew were quite disappointed with the weather because they wanted it to be a bit more dark and gloomy to set the tone for Hamlet. But unfortunately, for them, the weather was actually stunning, so they just had to go with it and do what they could. But you can see it still looks a pretty impressive outline on the skyline there. And staying in this area just a little bit further up the coast, we also have Slains Castle, which is said to be the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So Bram Stoker is an Irish writer, and he was staying nearby at a guest house in a place called Cruden Bay, and he'd gone for a walk along the cliffs and the coastline, and came across Slains Castle, which probably wasn't ruined as much as it is in those days, but he could tell that this was perhaps a perfect setting for Dracula's castle. So perhaps the one that we see in Transylvania was actually inspired by this one on the cliff tops in Scotland. And as we move further up to the northeast coast, there's a couple of classic films here that are really interesting to go and explore the locations. And these are Whiskey Galore and the Local Hero movies. So Whiskey Galore, the first version was actually made in the 1950s on the west coast of Scotland, and it was based on a true story about a ship destined for America with cargo. It ran aground on some rocks off the west coast of Scotland, and the cargo included thousands and thousands of cases of whiskey. Now the islanders did not want to see that whiskey go down with the ship, so they created a very elaborate plan to row out to the boat, to the ship, and to rescue all this whiskey. However, the excise men, as it being just around the time of the war, the excise men were on duty and making sure that they were going to be paying the due tariffs on all this whiskey. So the islanders had to come up with some cunning plans to try and hide this whiskey around the island. So the new make of the film was done in, just a few years ago, and up in the northeast. And you can see in Portsoy, the village on the top left here, it's just perfect for that sort of, community of people trying to hide whiskey and smuggle things in boats, and have this chase with the excise people. So it's a great film to watch, either the original or the remake, if you want a bit of good Scottish comedy. And as we move up into the Highlands now, we have plenty of opportunity for filming because the landscape is so stunning and beautiful, and just depending on the different seasons and the different times of day and the light, you get so much drama and effect from the Highlands landscape. So you can see why filmmakers really love it. So plenty of movies being set here. This one I've obviously wanted to include the Glenfinnan Viaduct, which has got steam train which goes over, which of course was the Hogwarts Express in the Harry Potter films. Now this train doesn't go to Hogwarts, but it goes from Fort William to Mallaig, and you can have a great day out on the train. You can take this train trip and explore all you can see the scenery as you go around. It's absolutely stunning, and actually some of this landscape around the train line was used in a number of the Harry Potter movies, and we actually have some information on our website about some of the places that were featured. So if you watch the films, I'm sure you'll be able to recognise some of these locations. And of course Harry Potter has become so famous over the years, and Scotland is really a key part of those adventures. Of course, there's James Bond, Skyfall, a great opportunity to go and drive through the Highlands and follow the route that M and Bond did in the classic car, and look out over this sort of misty, magical landscape. We know that obviously Skyfall and that the kind of the homeland of Bond was not a happy experience for him, but when the film came out, the visitor numbers to that area absolutely rocketed because people wanted to go and see that stunning landscape that you see on screen, which is really so awe-inspiring when it's seen in the cinema, and people can go and recreate that picture for themselves. And another classic here, we have Highlander with Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery in the in this classic movie shot at Eilean Castle. And this is really one of the ones which have always been included in sort of top Scottish movies, and with the soundtrack by the band Queen, and you can see some of the scenery here, and the Scottish connections to Highlander. And then just a little bit further to the west, we go over to the Isle of Skye, and you can really see why this is called a mystical isle. So some of the rock formations have not changed very much. You can see how it just has a really prehistoric feeling about it, and why it can be a fantastic magnet for filmmakers, because it really just can lend itself to so many different movie sort of titles and genres. So we had here even Disney enhanced a little bit of the scenery for Giant's Land and the BFG, but you can see that it's very clearly visible as Skye, and it's not been too enhanced there, because the nature does all the talking and the landscape speaks for itself. Also filmed on Skye, we have here the remake of Macbeth, starring Michael Fassbender, and over the years we've also had Prometheus, we've had Stardust, The Dark Knight Rises, Snow White and the Huntsman. So it's always been a very popular location for filmmakers, and I'm sure you can see why. And this is the end of our journey around Scotland now. So I wanted to end here in the Outer Hebrides, which are islands on the very far northwest of Scotland. Some beautiful, beautiful landscapes, and you can see some of the heritage and the nature here has inspired so many different productions. There's some great standing stones here called the Callanish stones, and those were the inspiration for Disney Pixar with their stones. They may also have had an influence in the Outlander stones. That there are other stones around the Highlands, but we know that they did visit here, and it could well have helped to inspire the ones which Clare went to stand by and travelled through time. And also, people might not know that in Stanley Kubrick's film, the 2001 Space Odyssey, the Isle of Harris was actually used as the surface of Jupiter because it really created such a sort of lunar landscape. So yeah, sometimes you can definitely say that Scotland is out of this world. So I think that you can definitely see from this picture here, there's some really fantastic range of landscapes that you can go and explore, and you can see why filmmakers and writers have been so inspired over the years. So that's all from me today, and I'll leave you with this lovely picture of the Hebrides. So hopefully that will be enough to inspire you to come to Scotland and explore it for yourself when you can. But in the meantime, why not do some planning, and you can go to our website and find out all the information that you need to know. And we're really looking forward to seeing you back as soon as you're able to. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.